I told you I was going to edit that in. I see if I had a copy of you howling, I would have done that too, but having the bark was well worth it. But thank you for the raid, Guilty. I gotta play it again. Congrats on getting for a star. So if you came in with the raid from Guilty, you probably know who I am already, so. It doesn't surprise me. Siri doesn't know how to pronounce weird things. Not many people can get Valkyrie. Unless, you know, they actually hear it first. I keep forgetting I can play the walk-on anytime I want. Okay. Oh, sound words are so much fun. Darth, I thought you would like to know you're the reason I started using a particular speed with every Cybertruck destruction. I slow it down to 67%. Just for the hell of it now. So anytime you see a Cybertruck explode in my VODs, at least, you know, the ones on YouTube anyway, they're blowing up. They're blowing up at 67% speed. And I would have, you know, yesterday, well, the stream from 2 days ago, I only blew up one Cybertruck. Another one I rode into the water after doing a jump, so. Then I also did that to NCPD Man of War. But yeah. All the mods are currently working, so I can go back to destroying Cybertrucks. Well, they're already in the mail, so you can't do anything against it now. But the left token, I'm sure I will put somewhere. Maybe even take a picture of it and put it in here somewhere. Because, you know, I have this thing about putting, you know, real life props in my sets. Let's see. The majority of this one was done in a 3D rendering program. The tip jar, I actually took a picture of a jar and put pennies in it. Then the little orange card next to me is the membership card from Gnome Depot that they printed off for me. So yeah, I add things that people give me. I don't think I have anything hidden in this scene, though. Unless I don't have anything hidden with the book up. The book on. No, I don't have anything particularly hidden in this one. Oh well. I need to work on my scenes again. Because I need to fix the bookshelves in here and everything else. I wanted to get a working clock model to put back there, even though it's never going to be seen. I actually have a clock in my possession that I'm tempted to take a picture of and put into the model. Because I took a clock, removed the inner parts of it, and have an obsidian looking glass inside of it. So it is a time clock that shows age. Let's see, what else can I access from here? No, when I just trigger the sound alert, it doesn't do it. Let's see. Because when I trigger it from Twitch, no, it's not working. Crap. Dang it. I had it set up in OBS that would actually, well, not in OBS, in VTube Studio, that it would actually give me the caller. Hey, Matsu, welcome in. We are going to be doing more folktales, and looking ahead, there's going to be a lot of animal stories this time around. Let's see, what's this? Because we're in the second section of the book. That is, let's see, Treasury of American Folklore, Part 2, Boosters and Knockers. And now this nice little quote underneath it. Everything is upon the great scale upon this continent. The rivers are immense, the climate violent in heat and cold, the prospects magnificent, the thunder and lightning tremendous. The disorders incident to the country make every constitution tremble. Our own blunders here, our misconduct, our losses, our disgraces, our ruin, are on a great scale. That's Lord Carlo to George Selwyn, 1778. Yes, that was the last word heard on stream is yelling at Darth. Let's see. Section 1. Tall Talk. I can outspeak any man, Davy Crockett. We pride ourselves in the backwoods upon being original and perpendicular, like the bow of a hammer. Timothy Flint. 1. Making a noise and language. The language of the ring-tailed roarer, and without his language he was like Samson without his hair, was tall talk. Tall talk may be defined as an art of making a noise and language. As such, it is characterized by grand eloquence, boasting, and exaggeration. At its best, it is a kind of poetry. At its worst, it is bombast and buncombe. For the most part, however, it is comic in effect or intention, insofar as exaggeration is a source of humor, or as tall talk has been associated with the local color sketches, yarns, and tall tales of the old Southwest. Froth and specks of the fermentation processes of language, as that tall-talking poet Whitman described slang. Tall talk is a slang of the frontier movement, when windy bragging and laughing at bragging were at their height. Tall talk is not only frontier in spirit, it is also national and regional. Since broad exaggeration has been identified with American humor, and through it is the character of the people and the physical features of the country, tall talk has come to be considered part of our national heritage, along with tall tales and tall heroes. During the growth of nationalism and the new nation after the War of 1812, rankless and Protestantism in speech accompanied the release of political and industrial energies of the country. Robert Kept, the British compiler of the American Joe Miller, wrote in 1865 of his American cousins, "Their ordinary speech is hyperbole, or tall talk. They never go out shooting unless with a longbow." Regional characteristics are clearly stamped upon tall talk. In the United States, what has been called the dividing line of loquacy runs east and west as well as north and south. It corresponds roughly to the Mason and Dixon line and the Mississippi or Missouri River. The tradition of good talk and talkativeness has been home south by west. Here, country folks frolic in public gatherings, parties, picnics, barbecues, camp and political meetings, and muster and court days have invited talk, folk talk, man talk, back talk, and encouraged yarn starting and stump speech eloquence. Such backwoods eloquence is expansive eloquence, in contrast to the reluctant Yankee crackerbox philosopher brand. It must not be thought, however, that tall talk was illiterate. In its bundle of crooked and stupendous words and phrases, it possessed many of the features of a literary dialect. Gentle reader admonishes the anonymous author of Sketches of Eccentricities of Colonel David Crockett of West Tennessee, in a prefatory statement bellowed by a vote for Crockett. I can promise you in no part of this volume the wild Romanites of Bushfield, nor can I regale you with a still more delicate repast of constant repetition of the terms bodaciously, tetalaciously, and offensively. And though I have much intercourse in the West, I have never met with a man who used such terms unless they were alluded to as merely occupying a space in some printed work. They have, however, thus been made to enter, as a component part, into the character of every backwoodsman. Like most literary dialects, tall talk was spread on thick with its particular partitioners. Spread on thick by its practitioners. The picturesque, grotesque tropes and expletives attributed to backwoodsmen and boatmen in fiction, for all their allusions to everyday objects and activities of the time and place, constitute a species of literary folklore. Basic to this strong language is, of course, what John Russell Bartlett, and his Dictionary of Americanisms, 1848, refers to as the fondness of Americans, especially in the South and West, for intensive and extravagant epithets. Awful, powerful, monstrous, dreadful, mighty, all-fired. Tall talk was strong language, constantly striving to outdo itself. Thus Bartlett defines teetotosity as a strange Western term meaning a little more than teetotal, if such a thing be possible. By means of strange blends and coinages, coupled with far-fetched comparisons and extravagant conceits, as shaggy and rambunctious as the backwoodsmen who were supposed to utter them, tall talk went the whole hog. 2. An entire zoological institute. Tall talk also had its mythology, in which animal allusions figured prominently. These point to a hunting and trapping existence and love of sports as turf and field, such as produced the hunting and sporting yarns that filled William T. Porter's borrowed journal of oral and anecdotal humor, The Spirit of the Times, 1831 through 1861. Like the woods, the Crockett almanacs were full of bear, catamount, beaver, panther, moose, wolf, raccoon, possum, turkey, etc. Of the word screamer, a bouncing fellow or girl, Bartlett notes, this, like the word roar, is one of many terms transferred from animals to men by the hunters of the West. It is not too fantastic to see this transfer of names as nicknames, totemic transfer of traits, reflected in the application to humans of such terms as hoss, old hoss, colt, a pretty severe colt, coon, a right smart coon, and a gone coon, varmint, a critter. So basically, calling humans by animal terms made the animals more intelligent. Strong language. 1. Fanciful, facetious, and factitious intensifying words from the specimens in part 1. Obsquilate. Verb. Abscond and squat. To depart, run away. Anageliferous. Adjective. Angelic. Audaciously and bodyaceously. Adverb. Bold and audacious, or possibly an absurd extragulation of bodily, wholly complete. Southern dialect, audaciously tired, or badociously earnest. Bollerated. See exfuncted. Exfuncted, exfunctuated, functified, effunctified, explunctificated, flunked, overcome, outdone, exhausted, crushed, demolished, and beaten thoroughly. Obfuscated, bewildered, confused, whatever way. Ram-squaddled and rum-squaddled. Six-funked. Ring-tailed roarer or squealer. Noun. Centoider and braggart. Rip-saver. Noun. A first-rate person or thing, or dashing fellow. Screamer. Noun. A bouncing fellow or girl. Slandiculator. In a slanting direction. Tarnal, tarnacious. Eternal, a Yankee form of swearing. Teetotal, total. Teetotalacious and teetotaciously, totally. Wolfish or wolfy, a savage. I take offense. Figurative expressions. That's going to be fun ones. 1. Shut pan and sing dumb, or I'll throw you into the drink. Hold your tongue, you beauty, or you shall smell brimstone through a nail hole. I wish I may run on a Sawyer if I didn't. I'll be choked with a Solog if I do. See if I don't row you up Salt River before they're many days older. I wouldn't risk a huckleberry to a persimmon that we don't even sold get treed and sent to the bottom like gone suckers. Drive him like a flash of lightning through the gooseberry bush. A mighty grist of rain. I'll be shot. Prayed like a horse. He had turned the edge of the razor in attempting to cut through the fog. I'll wool lightning out of you if you interrupt me. You'll find I'm from the forks of Roaring River and a bit of a screamer. I told him I knew him as well as the squirrel knows a hickory nut from an acorn. I told him stories that were enough to set the Mississippi afire. You do take the rag off the bush. Poking his nose everywhere like a dog smelling out a trail. You don't know a bee from a buffalo's foot. 2. Hang me up for barmaid if I don't push off without him. File me for a seahorse if I wouldn't rather crawl into a nest of wildcats heels foremost than be crouched alone with you in the nighttime. Quicker nor an alligator can chew a puppy. Choked to death like a catfish on a sandbank. And now for some of the linguistically inappropriate ones. Dumb as a dead nigger in a mud hole. Harder nor climbing a pew and sapling boots upward. Travel like a nigger in a thunderstorm. All of these are, of course, in the book. Then there's animal comparisons. I'm a Hosmer, never war road. I can walk like an ox, run like a fox, swim like an eel, and make love like a mad bull. I'm shaggy as a bear, wolfish about the head, active like a cougar, and can grin like a hyena until the bark will curl up on gum log. There's a sparkling of all sorts in me, from the lion down to the skunk. But before the war is over, he will pronounce me an entire zoological institute, or if I miss a figure in my calculation. A man that comes to settle in these parts must be wide awake, and rip and tear away like a horse in a train bake. A man must begin with an eggshell. The partridge learns to run, get up aboard daytime in a year and year out, before he can get to be much worth. I mean in the way of living in these parts. Aren't I a leaping trout of the waters? One said, I'm a man, I'm a horse, I'm a team. I can whip my any man in all Kentucky, by God. The other replied, I'm an alligator, half man, half horse, can whip any on the Mississippi, by God. The first one again, I'm a man, have the best horse, best dog, best gun, and handsomest wife in Kentucky, by God. The other, I'm a Mississippi snapping turtle, have bear's claws, alligator's teeth, and devil's tail, and can whip any man, by God. Yeah, so that's a sample of what's in this book. And there is a reason I decided to put the racist language possible in the descriptions. Because as much as I disagree with the language, I am kind of a purist in certain things. On the same lines that I don't think that Mark Twain should ever be removed from schools because of language. Because it is history. And history does not necessarily mean it is pretty. And so the full book I'm reading from was from the 1940s. Copyright date on it is 1944 for the actual book. The stories themselves range from all over the place. So there will be language. And I make my apologies personally, but I'm not going to censor myself. Two, the sky's the limit. A Kentuckian once asked what he considered the boundaries of the United States. The boundaries of our country, sir, he replied. Why, sir, on the north we are bounded by the aurora borealis, on the east we are bounded by the rising sun, on the south we are bounded by the precession of the equinoxes, and on the west by the day of judgment. The American, Joe Miller. 1. The eagle screams. In a wild country, it was good business for wild men to go about scaring people with strange noises and by making terrible faces playfully. But as the hunter was displaced by the second and third orders of the back settlers, the squatter and the homesteader, the roars and screamers were not only hollered out but outlicked by a new type of boaster and tall talker. This was the boomer and the boaster, drunk not of his own powers, but with the bigness of the country and the illusion of inexhaustible resources and opportunities. Here history repeated itself. As the backwoodsman's antics and war cries were partially to intimidate the Indian, so the advocates of Western expansion and settlement borrowed from the backwoodsman the elbow motif. This had been given expression for all time of Daniel Boone when in 1799, at the age of 65, he was asked why people were leaving Kentucky for frontier Missouri. Too many people, too crowded, I want more elbow room. The frontier also had a saying, when you see the smoke of your neighbor's chimney, it's time to move. The backwoodsman, says the Crockett Almanac in 1838, was a singular being, always moving westward like a buffalo before the tide of civilization. He does not want a neighbor nearer than 10 miles, and when he cannot cut down a tree that will fall within 10 rods of his log house, he thinks it is time to sell out his betterments and be off. But to the expansionists and the promoters of free land in the West, elbow room meant room for improvements, for free enterprise, and so more neighbors, in terms of nothing less than a continent of manifest destiny. With the movement for territorial expansion and free land, the country entered upon one of the greatest advertising campaigns in history, the booming of the West. This was a campaign which statesmen and orators joined the land and railroad companies, farmers' organizations, departments of agriculture, bureaus of immigration, boards of trade, and chambers of commerce. The theme of countless speeches, immigrant handbooks, immigrants and railroad guides, state and regional guidebooks and gazetteers, state yearbooks, rural almanacs, real estate directories, and government reports was, "The sky's the limit. Watch us grow. We don't have to prove it, we admit it." In style, this propaganda rivaled the expensive eloquence of ring-tailed lawyer and the stump speaker. Its flamboyant ballyhoo provided that more than the protective coloration of the homespun hero playing the tough guy and the smart aleck. Tall talk is the highfalutin style of the provincial Americans whose motto is "braggin' saves advertising." In the vanguard of Western expansion was another screamer, the American eagle. This favorite fowl of orators was derived from the American emblem in the Great Seal and in coinage, not according to Franklin, the most appropriate emblem of America. But the bird suffers not so much from a bad moral character, generally poor and often very lousy, and a rank coward, ascribed to it by Franklin as sheer triteness. From the aspects of the Allegheny to the summit of Mount Hood, the bird of America was so often made to take flight that a shadow may be said to have worn a trail across the basin of the Mississippi. The scream of the expansionist eagle was heard, and the swelling peroration of Samuel C. Pomeroy's expansion plea into House Homestead Bill, whose passage climaxed a 10 years debate in Congress on the free land question. Both the patriotic epidemic and the spread eagle oratory of expansionism are taken off a mock speech on the Oregon question by comedian Yankee Hill. His peroration is in the tall talking tradition of "Change the name of Arkansas? Hell no." 2. The Wonder State. In his speech on the land policy of the United States, cited above, the Honorable Richard Yates expressed the hope that we will not be governed by the narrow considerations of a sectional jealousy. A railroad in Illinois, like a lighthouse on the seacoast, is a common property of the nation. We have one country. Our interests are one, our history is one, our destiny is the same, a glorious destiny of free and sovereign states to unexampled power and renown. But it is the destiny that the prerogative of free and sovereign states to claim, each in its own way, an unexampled power of renown. State nicknames, which have become part of the folklore of American places, crystallize these local aspirations of pretensions and uniqueness and excellence. The Boomer's Paradise, Oklahoma, the Garden of the West, Illinois and Kansas, the Land of Heart's Desire or the Land of Sunshine, New Mexico, the Land of Plenty, New Mexico and South Dakota, and the Wonder State, Arkansas. As an instance of the willingness with each state government took on the leading in telling the world of our wonderful possibilities, one may point to the concurrent resolution of the Arkansas Senate approving the nickname the Wonder State, virtually an agreement in favor of changing the name of Arkansas. The objection to the earlier nickname of the Bear State is typical of the desire of the self-conscious West to live down the frontier past, commemorated by such uncomplimentary terms as the Puke State, Missouri, and the Grasshopper State, Kansas. The Prince of State Greeters and Boosters was Robert Love Taylor, 1850 to 1910, the fiddling governor of Tennessee and the apostle of love, laughter, and sunshine, who devoted his sky-painting talents as orator, editor, and writer chiefly to booming the South. His village apocalypse quality and his inventive epic earnestness have been praised by another village improviser, Philip Lindsay, in this poem. Preface to Bob Taylor's birthday. For all his Pollyanna optimism and his mush and syrup sentiment, Taylor had something of the folk touch in his art of improvisation and a backwoodsy homeliness with native figures and illusions. Above all, he had a big heart, which went out to all big things such as Uncle Sam, Dixie, and Tennessee, or any state that exerted or felt the influence of the sunny South. Here is a tall talk in the plug that swallow-tailed coat, the striped trousers and glad-handed Uncle Sam. The advertising pages of Bob Taylor's magazine, a monthly address to all parts of the prosperous South, were filled with the come-on invitations of the Southwest Railroad and land companies and commercial clubs, for whose promotion Taylor had set a pace in his editorials and essays in October 1906, gave a cue to the following cure. Have you a Board of Trade or a Chamber of Commerce or a Boosters Club? A southern town now without a live Board of Trade might do disincorporate and go back into the woods. One of the most elaborate in these advertisements rivaled Taylor's lush pen was depicting the farmlands in the Nueces River Valley as a paradise on earth, worthy of Teddy Roosevelt's characterization of Texas as the garden spot of the land. 3. God's Country. Besides manifest destiny, free land, and state pride, the West had another thing under its bow. Longbow which it drew in order to live down its wild and woolly reputation and to attract settlers. This was the myth of the land flowing with milk and honey, part of the American dream of a promised land of plenty, opportunity, and beginning, which was first attracted settlers to the Old World and to the New, and was now transferred to the fabulous far-off West. To make its ardors outweigh its endurances, orators, promoters, and guidebook writers painted this unknown country in the rosy hues of fairyland. The land of nature's bounty was God's country, defined as a special part of the United States or the country as a whole, viewed nostalgically as almost a paradise. God's country was sometimes a country one was going to, perhaps always going to, and never reaching, like a pot of gold at the end of a rainbow. And it was sometimes a place that no one was going back to. Or perhaps it was only in the heart, not a place by state of mind. To Boone, in retrospect, it was real enough, the Kentucky he had left behind him. I've traveled, he said in his old age, over many new countries in the great Mississippi Valley, and I've critically examined their soils, their mineral wealth, their healthful climates, and their manufacturing situations, and the commercial advantages given them by nature. I've discovered where these endowments were given most bountifully in many localities, singly or in groups, but I have never found but one Kentucky, a place on earth where nature seems to have concentrated all her bounties. For many a pioneer settler, however, who, while in quest of God's country, often had to ask, is this God's country or not? And has God forsaken us? There was only this consolation left at the end of the search. We learned that God's country isn't in the country, it is in the mind. As we look back now, we knew that all the time we were hunting God's country, we had it. We worked hard, we was loyal, honest, we was happy. For 48 years we lived together in God's country. The potency of this phrase was part of the pioneer myth. This assumed that the land, which should be as free as the air and the sunshine, was a symbol of the inalienable rights of man, that all land was good land and all settlers were good farmers, and that in its green pastures one should not want. That the land had certain imperishable values of its own which could not be derived, not only substance and profit, but also strength and courage, and that the pioneer, inured with self-reliance through hardship and disencouragement, was a soldier of civilization and of God. 4. Withal, there is an effective climate. In a land of violent extremes and abrupt contrasts in weather, the climate, the quest for health and happiness, put a premium on optimum environments. The land advertisements boasted of such advantages as dry, bracing air, 300 or more days of sunshine a year, and negatively no killing frosts, hail, blizzards, hot winds, heat waves, tornadoes, cyclones, whirlwinds, hurricanes, earthquakes, or similar afflictions. Why shovel snow and shiver was a rhetorical question. No chill, no Negroes, no saloons, no mosquitoes, went a sweeping statement from Arkansas. The guidebooks were equally reassuring. It is complained that the wind blows. As it blows everywhere, so it blows in Colorado, occasionally. Sometimes these winds are monumentally disagreeable, but they serve nature as her sanctuary measures, and the effect of refreshing beneficial. Withal, there is an effect of climate, and something of a freedom caught in the outdoorness of life. Sunshine and green salads all the year will promote cheerfulness. Where there are no bitter winds, no sleet or hail, no blizzards to kill flocks and herds, no cold snaps to freeze poultry on the perch or water pipes in the kitchen, it is not at all surprising that people laugh and are affected by the great world of sun and summer in which they dwell. Immigrant and Western songs fell in line with chauvinism, utopianism, and Arcadianism of the guidebooks, reflected in many a state song and poem of the sweet singer, or boasting variety in many popular song with nostalgia for this, that, or the other wonder state. The boast of a climate so healthy that people rarely die except from accident or old age, as one in the Nenson's River Valley land advertisement, was a common. One of the best of the stories on this theme was related to Barnum, as he heard it from a sleight of hand artist named Henry Hawley. Related to the stories of life-prolonging air are the stories of air that restores life. In East Texas, it is the wind that revives corpses. Truth of it is, Dad was dead, but we put that cotton bust open, that strong, healthy plains wind hit him and just filled his lungs with good reviving air, and Dad nor no one else could stay dead. In Florida, it is the sunshine, as on the occasion when the corpse of a gangster has been imported from Chicago so that a funeral could be staged by local dealer cemetery lots. The coffin was taken to the graveside and the lid was opened to give the bystanders a glimpse of the beautiful way the corpse had been laid out, a masterpiece of the undertaker's work. As the Florida sunshine hit the body, there was an immediate stir. The gangster rose with a yell and feeling for his gun. The bystanders had to kill him again before they could go on with the funeral. Variations on a theme are found in the stories of a dying person being revived with the air expelled from a bicycle or automobile tire, which had been pumped up in California or Arizona, or of the incurable victim of tuberculosis being healed by a single ray of Florida sunshine. Rival claims of Salvier's climate are accompanied with mutual recrimination of each state rivalry's keen. Thus, Florida papers cast aspirations on California as a terrible place, going rapidly to a bad with frosts, storms, earthquakes, and other calamities. California and other resort places reciprocate. So the older feud between Florida and California has more recently been added to the competition between California and the Rio Grande Valley. But we have the healthiest climate in California. It's so healthy we have to shoot a man in order to start a graveyard. That's no comparison to our valley climate of health. One of our citizens went out to California, took sick, and died there. As he was shipped his remains back to the valley, and friends of the deceased were gathered round the corpse. When they opened the casket, he raised up and greeted his friends and walked off. I know someone that's happened to. Tacked on to Hawley's yarn is a tale of a monstrous large gun, which required 1 pound of powder and 4 pounds of shot to load it properly, and with which Hawley shot off 4.5 bushels of wild pigeons' feet and legs, without killing a single bird. When the flock rose off the ground, just half a second ahead of the shot. A great number of pigeons and a large field of buckwheat which were feared they would destroy reflect the abundance of crops and game associated with the marvels of the climate and soil. Here he brags about rich land and big crops. Big crops shade off the yarns of varying degrees of exaggeration. The Boosters Club gives way to the Liars Club, with the occasional knock for the famine that often followed the feast, or the bust that followed the boom. In 1851, the Commissioner of Patents reported that delivered by A. Williams, Esquire, at a meeting of San Francisco for presenting premium of the silver goblet offered by Mr. C. A. Shelton for the best varieties of vegetables and grains. Among other prize products are an onion weighing 21 pounds, a turnip which equally exacted on top of the flour barrel, another weighing 100 pounds, a cabbage measuring 13 feet 6 inches around, a beet weighing 63 pounds, and carrots 3 feet in length weighing 40 pounds, not to mention a single potato larger than the size of an ordinary hat, of which 12 persons partook at a dinner in Stockton, leaving at least half untouched. Then the speaker added ironically, "And we've had still larger and taller specimens of other things near home, here in our city, to which many will hear me bear witness of experience, and which outcome to maturity, monthly in advance, rents the tallest kind of rents, put up higher than the pines, and sometimes harder to get around than the redwood." 5. Laughing it off. Praise of the wonders and glories of the new country was offset by a healthy skepticism which viewed with alarm instead of pointing with pride. Hardship and failure gave rise to inverse exaggerations and offensive boasting, of the kind that proceeds from having too little rather than too much. A common symbol of disillusionment was a returning immigrant or prospector admonishing the westward traveler to turn back. In the frontispiece of Major Wilkie's narrative, a fashionable young man in stark chase behind a spirited horse proclaims, "I'm going to Illinois," whereas from the lips of the broken-down owner of a broken-down wagon, the broken-down-winded horse, a broken-hearted wife, a broken-legged dog, and what is still more to be lamented, an irreparable broken constitutions of my 3-fevered unused sons, Jonathan, Jerry, and Joe, replied Eminence. "I've been," a modern parallel furnished by the Grapes of Wrath, "in the Jodes and on their way where it's rich and green, and they can get work and a piece of growing land with water, are laughed at by a ragged man who inquires, 'Folks going to California, I bet. I told you that,' said Pa. 'I've guessed nothing,' the ragged man said slowly. 'Me, I'm coming back. I've been there. I'm going to starve. I'd rather starve over here the concept.'" Disappointed victims of gold fever, who had been advised not to be so sanguine of success, turned back with mottos properly amended and expressed their disgust. "Busted by thunder," set a pattern for slogans all settlers who did not have the grit, grace, and gumption necessary to tough it out in the tough country. Disillusionment, in turn, was seasoned with historical humor of the type known as laughing it off, or smiling in the face of adversity. Grasshopper plagues were commemorated in the wagon inscription. Hoppers ate all but the wagon sheet, and saying that the grasshoppers had eaten everything except for the mortgage, and in the story of the grasshopper who ate the farmer's team of mules and then pitched the horseshoes for the wagon. In Nebraska, one could stand by the side of a field and hear the grasshoppers threatening. On the potato vines, they could eat downward, and then there came out the potato bug who would calmly kick it and go down in a devastating way. On the Great Plains, it has been said, "If you ain't burned up by the drought and the winds, hot as hell, or frozen out by blizzards and hailstorms, you'll be eaten up by grasshoppers, speculators, and politicians." And it might have been added centipedes, snakes, bedbugs, fleas, and other pests that infested the primitive shelters of pioneer settlers. This is the plant of Western hard times, the songs of the lame country bachelor, which prove that only thin lines separate stoicism and revolt. And nothing but the continent. "Mr. Speaker, when I take my eyes and throw them over the vast expanse of this expansive country, when I see how the yeast of freedom has caused it to rise in a scale of civilization and extension on every side, when I see it growing, swelling, roaring like a spring freshet, when I see all this, I cannot resist the idea, sir, that the day will come when this great nation, like a young schoolboy, will burst its straps and become entirely too big for its boots. Sir, we want elbow room, the continent, the whole continent, and nothing but the continent, and we will have it. Then shall Uncle Sam be placing his hat upon the canvas, and rest his arm on Oregon and California coast, and left his eastern seaboard, and whittle away the British power while reposing his leg like a freeman upon Cape Horn. Sir, that day will, that day must come. Manifest Destiny. Mr. Chairman, the population of the Valley of the Mississippi already constitutes more than 1/3 of the entire population of the Union. And, sir, the time is not distant when the seat of empire, the stronghold of numerical power, will be west of the Alleghanies. The handwriting is on the wall. It is manifest destiny, sir. It is written on the signs and times in clear, fresh, and unmistakable lines. The same flag that flashes its stars to the sun on the banks of the Hudson and Potomac is hailed by millions of rejoicing freemen on the banks of the Mississippi and the Columbia. Within the last 5 years, 3 new states have been added to the Union, and there is territory at the head of the Missouri and the Arkansas and the territories of Nebraska, New Mexico, Utah, and Oregon. And the vision of an ocean-bound republic is now a reality. Sir, what is mighty theater for American enterprise? What a mighty course for the race of the democratic liberty! It is already our boast as a nation, sir, that we enjoy more liberty, a more universal diffusion of knowledge, and a more exalted national character than any nation on the globe. But the striking feature of the American character is its enterprise. An enterprise that knows no obstacles, counts no cost, fears no dangers, and triumphs over all obstacles. Proudest Bird on the Mountain. Our country is yet to be the infancy of its being, and yet 3 centuries old. And our settlements are but specks dotted around upon the edge of the map of the continent. The great heart of America, with its treasures as precious as life streams, is yet to go unexplored and almost unknown. This bill, enacted into law, shall give civilization and life throughout the silent gorges and gentle sweeping valleys far away to the deep recesses of the continent. Where it leads the way, there shall go in triumph the American standard, the old flag of the Union. And when once planted, it shall never again be trailed in dust. The proudest bird upon the mountain is upon the American sign, and not one feather shall fall from her plumage here. She is American by design, and emblem of wildness and freedom. I say again, she has not perched herself upon American standards to die here. Our great western valleys were never scoped out for her burial place, nor were the everlasting untrodden mountains piled for her monument. Niagara shall not pour her endless waters for her requiem, nor shall our 10,000 rivers weep in the ocean for eternal tears. No, sir, no. Unnumbered voices shall come up from the river, plain, mountain, echoing the songs of our triumphant deliverance, while lights from 1,000 hilltops will betoken the rising of the sun and freedom, and shall grow brighter and brighter until a perfect day. Speech on the Oregon question. Yet the time is not far off when the locomotive will be steaming its way to the Rocky Mountains with a mighty big train of cars running after her. Yes, the whistle of the engine will echo through the southwest, past the sharply hints of the free people of the great territory, and approach the hundreds of thousands, too, who are to be their natives. No, sir, the time is not far distant, when our conference with China will equal that of the world, when the Pacific Ocean will be crossed with such an ease as the frog pond of the Boston Common. Yes, Mr. Speaker, as my eloquent friend from the Hoosier State remarks, men of blood and friends of General Washington and that old hoss, General Jackson, I want you on this wrath. I want your attention. The lightning has burst upon us, and Jupiter has poured out the eye of his wrath. Thunder has broke loose and slipped its cable, and is now rattling down the mighty valley of the Mississippi, accompanied by the music of the alligator hornpipe. Citizens and fellows, on the bloody ground which our fathers confidently poured out their claret free as isle, and to enrich the soil over which now we honor and watch the hyena eyes and the catamount of the inner varmint loose and prepare the engines of vengeance. For the long-looked-for day has come. The crocodile of the Mississippi has gone into his hole, and the son that lit King David from his host across the Atlantic Sea looks down upon the scene and drops a tear to its memory. I am with you, and while the stars of Uncle Sam and the stripes of this country triumph and float in the breeze, war, war, in the cavern, low-lived, chaylant-bred, toad-hopping, red-mouthed mother's son Z, we will not raise the beacon of light of triumph, snouse the citadel of the aggressor, and press onward to liberty and glory. Whoa, hurrah! Where is the enemy? I'm having fun doing these speeches. The Wonder State. Whereas it is an admitted fact that the state of Arkansas excels all others in natural resources, its store of mineral wealth being practically inexhaustible, and its vast forests supplying pine and hardwood in quantities sufficient to place the state in the forefront, and its agricultural and horticultural prowess recognized not only in the United States, but in foreign countries as well. And whereas the publicity campaign of the Arkansas Advancement Association has so indelibly stamped upon the mind of the world that Arkansas is the Wonder State, and whereas the title is so befitting, while the old one, the Bear State, is a misnomer and leads to false impression, while the Wonder State is accurate and is deserving of special recognition. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the state and the state of Arkansas, the House of Representatives concurring, that we accept the name the Wonder State given us by the Patriotic Association, which has done much to acquaint the world with Arkansas and its wealth of resource, and we hereby specifically proclaim that hereafter Arkansas shall be known and styled the Wonder State. And now it has Walmart. Uncle Sam. The most striking and picturesque in all history is a picture of a lean and sinewy old man with long hair and chin whiskers, and wearing an old-fashioned plug hat. His pantaloons are in stripes of red and white, and his blue swallowtail coat is bespangled with stars. He is the personification of the United States, and we call him Uncle Sam. He is a composite of the wildcat and the crooning dove and the lion and the lamb, and the summer evening's last sigh that shuts the rose. He is the embodiment of all that is most terrible. The world stands appalling at his wonderful power, and bows in admiration to his matchless magnanimity. He is the tallest figure of this mundane sphere, and when he steps across the continent and sits down on Pike's Peak and snorts in his handkerchief of red, white, and blue, the earth quakes and the monarchs tremble from their thrones. From the peaceful walks of life he can mobilize a mighty army in 60 days, and in 90 days he can destroy a powerful navy and demolish an empire. He is the boss of the Western Hemisphere, sheriff of Cuba, justice of the peace of Puerto Rico, and guardian of ad etum of the Philippine Islands. He is as brave as Caesar and as meek as Moses. He is as fierce as a tiger and cool as a cucumber. He wears the tail feathers of the eagle of France in his hat, and the scalp of Mexico in his belt. He laughs at the roar of the Russian bear and is always ready for a schooner of German beer. All that is left of Spain is her Juana since her combat with Uncle Sam. No longer the Lion of England roars at our door, but the twain now stand together for liberty and humanity. In the Land of Dixie. I'd love to live in the Land of Dixie under the soft southern skies where the summer pours out her flood of sunshine and showers, and the generous earth smiles with plenty. I'd love to live on southern soil where the cotton fields wave their white banners of peace and the wheat fields wave back their banners and rolled from the hills and valleys which were once drenched with blood and heroes. I'd love to live when the mockingbirds flutter and sing of the shadowy coves and the bright waters ripple in eternal melody with the graves of our heroes are buried. I'd love to breathe the southern air that comes filtered through jungles of roses, whispering the story of southern deeds of bravery. I'd love to drink the southern springs and southern babbling brooks, which once cooled the lips of Lee and Jackson and Forrest and Jordan, and mourn in the weary columns of brave men who wore the gray. I love to live among southern men and women where every heart is as warm as a southern sunshine and every home is a temple of love and liberty. I love to listen to the sweet old southern melodies which touch the soul and melt the heart and awaken life's 10,000 precious memories of the happy long ago when the old time darkies used to laugh and sing and the old time black mammy soothed children to slumber with her lullabies. But oh, the music that thrills me most is a melody that died away on the lips of many a Confederate soldier as he sank into the sleep that no one knows walking. I'm glad I am in Dixie. Yeah. Who wrote that? That is an extract from the welcome address of Governor Taylor to the ex-Confederates at ex-Confederate reunion on Confederate Day at the Tennessee Centennial, June 24th, 1879. Yeah. Now we're going to go to break because let's not take a break. Too long. I'm definitely going to try to list the source material in the edited videos, just so people can read it for themselves. It's like in the Land of Dixie was an extract from the address of welcome by Governor Taylor to the ex-Confederates at ex-Confederate reunion on Confederate Day at Tennessee Centennial, June 24th, 1897. And it was recorded in a book called Echoes, Centennial and Other Notable Speeches, Lectures, and Stories by Governor Robert L. Taylor, pages 26 and 27, copyright 1899, by S.B. Williamson & Co., Nashville, Tennessee. So Confederate Day is June 24th. Interesting. But thank you, anyone who stayed through that. Guess I'll put another disclaimer. I will read it as it is written. I do not censor. History is not always pretty. If you want fairy tales, that'll be tomorrow. This next one's not any better. We will show you. Caney, Queen City of the B.I.T. in the Choctaw Nation, the garden spot of Indian Territory, surrounded by healthful and productive county, inhabited by high class of prosperous and contented people. Come and grow and prosper with us. Pryor Creek, Indian Territory, a good moral town and sociable people, plenty of room for pushing progressive people. Watch your Fowler grow, the best town in the best country in Oklahoma. We don't have to prove it. We admit it. The Gulf Coast country of Texas is the world's garden spot, and St. Louis, Brownsville, and Mexico Railway traverses it from end to end. Opportunities there are golden now. Great, grand, glorious Texas. Its stupendous resources can hardly be exaggerated. A mild climate, fertile soil, thrifty, healthy people. 90% of prospectors from the other states become permanent settlers. IGN, the Texas Railroad. So I'm just reading advertisements. So. Nunce's River Valley, Paradise. Located in that middle plain between East Texas, where it rains too much, and the arid section of West Texas, where it does not rain enough, there is a constant sea breeze to make cool summers and warm winters without snow or hard freezes. There are no blizzards, no tornadoes, no earthquakes, nor cyclones. Where the flowers bloom 10 months of the year, where the greatest variety of products can be grown, where the farmers and gardeners, whose seasons never end, eat homegrown June vegetables in January and bask in midwinter balmy air and the glorious sunshine, where the land yield is enormous and the prices always remunerative, where something can be planted and harvested every month of the year, where the climate is so mild that the northern farmer here saves practically all his fuel bills and 3/4 of the cost of clothing his family in the north, where the country is advancing and property values rapidly increasing, where all stock, without any feed, fatten winter and summer on the native grasses and brush which equal many feed pen, where the same land yields the substantials of the temperate and the luxuries of the tropic zones, where the farmer does not have to work hard 6 months in the year to raise, feed, and kick his stock from dying during winter, as they do in the north and northwest, where the winter does not consume what the summer produces, and where the markets for all are produced. where 2 full crops of the same kind, 3 vegetable crops, or 4 mixed crops can be raised from the same land in 1 year. Where the vegetation is so rapid that in 2 years the home is surrounded by trees and shrubs which would require 5 years to develop in a colder climate. Where there are no aristocrats, the people do not have to work hard to have plenty and to go in the best society. Where 10 acres, judiciously planted in fruits, will soon make one independence, all varieties being wonderfully successful and profitable. Where the natives work less and have more to show for what they do than any country on earth. Where houses, barns, and fences can be built for less than the half of the cost of the north. Where the average temperature is about 60 degrees, varying from 50 in the winter to 90 in the summer, which is rendered cool by constant sea breezes. Where the average rainfall for the past 5 years is over 39 inches, and well distributed, as shown in the government's report, which is more than some of the older states have. Where sunstrokes and heat prostrations are unknown. Where the residents have charming homes surrounded by trees and flowers in a semi-tropical climate. Where sufferers with asthma, bronchitis, catarrh, hay fever, and throat troubles find relief. Where one can work outdoors in short sleeves without inconvenience 29 out of every 30 days of the year. We're surrounded by fruits and vegetables which ripen every month in the year. Living is better and less expensive than in the north. Where the water is pure, soft, and plentiful. Where the laws protect both the investor and the settler. Where the people are so law-abiding that usually only 2 days of district courts every 6 months are required to dispose of all the civil and criminal business. Where the taxes are so low that the amount is never missed. Where the public and private schools and churches of all denominations are plentiful. Where peace, plenty, and goodwill prevails in such an extent that the people sleep with their doors and windows open the year round without danger of molestation. Where it is so healthy that people rarely die, except from accident or severe old age. Yeah, the Nueces Valley in Texas. The place that floods now. He shall not want. For my own part, I believe it should not be the policy of the government to derive a revenue from the sale of a land, any more than from the sale of the air or the sunshine. These natural elements and auxiliaries well bottle up, and one as deed away the other. The great demand was, when our earth came fresh, green, and beautiful from a divine hand, to take it, to people, and subdue it. I am, sir, for opening these lands to the landless of every nation under heaven. With 160 acres of God's free earth under a man in his own right, and genial skies above him, he shall not want. For seed time and harvest, winter and summer, night and day shall not fail him, to the heavens be no more. I need not disguise the fact that while this system of small farms in a quarter section of land will greatly represent the wealth, strength, and glory of the Republic, this conducing of human happiness, near and remote, now and for all ages, still a consequence that by the virtue of the same law, it will secure the entire public domain to human freedom forever. The pioneer struggling amidst many discouragements upon the frontier prairies of the West comes nearer obeying the divine injunction to gain his bread by the sweat of his brow than any other man. The men who have, from their circumstances and education, been inured with self-reliance can safely volunteer as soldiers of civilization on its onward progress across the continent, from the great valleys of the Mississippi and the Missouri to the shores of the Pacific. The man who is able to put all he owns on earth into one canvas-covered wagon, wife, children, household goods, and all move at a slow pace into what has been called the wilderness of the West, far out upon the frontier, beyond all law and civilization, and there plant himself down upon a homestead for life, as doing the work for himself, his family, for cultivation, his country, and for God, and that will never be fully unknown, or its influence told, until the final disclosure. Going to God's country. We were going to God's country, 1890, with a hustle and a bustle to get things ready. With 5 little children and the oldest only 10 years old, and getting food and clothing for a long journey, we could do that job very well, for we did not realize what we were getting into. We had some cousins that had gone 2 years before to the Indian Territory way down in what is called the Fleetwood Farms in the Chickasaw Nation. It is part of Oklahoma now, and that is where we were going. It is pretty hard to part with some things of our lives. We didn't have much, but we worked hard for everything we had. You had to work hard in the rocky country of Missouri. I was glad to be leaving it. We're going to God's country. Tough Missouri. Old Missouri was, after all, a pretty tough place. I hated to leave it, though it was all I knew. But we were going to God's country. We were going to a new land and get rich. Then we could have a real home of our own. But we didn't know what was ahead of us. We all drive in. We were all tired from the long, wearisome trip, and it seemed that every river we crossed was up. But our first was Sauk. The next bad river was the Arkansas. Next was the Cimarron. And then the North Canadian, and the South Canadian, hundreds of others it seemed. We went through part of Missouri, Kansas, Osage Nation, Pawnee Nation, Old Oklahoma proper, Chickasaw Nation, and then we landed in the Fleetwood Farms. It was on the Red River, just across from Texas. And there we were with our cousins, and was ever so happy. We all drove in this lot with 700 covered wagons, and so tired from 33 days' drive. But at last we were in God's country. We sleep with centipedes. The dugout was so full of centipedes that we had to sleep with a butcher knife under our pillows so we could have something to protect ourselves. Sleeping with the butcher knives under our pillows at night to kill the centipedes in our half dugout was existing. The dugout was made of logs with mud between them, so we'd want to put out the lights of our nights and centipedes would go running through the cracks. Then we would whack them into pieces. Some nights we would kill as many as 20. The next morning, first thing we would do to move our beds and sweep the dead ones out. But that was pioneering in God's country. We count blessings. We thought it was indeed God's country. We had worked hard for 11 years in Missouri and left there with $800 and a team and wagons. After we paid for picking and renting all the expenses, we had $820 left. And besides, we had our corn and our garden truck. And our garden was the best garden that we ever had. It seemed like every seed came up, and how the garden did grow. We had onions, tomatoes, cabbages, peas, beans, potatoes, peppers, lettuce, parsnips, muskmelons, watermelons, and everything in that line. People came from all around to see that garden. When we came, we went to Henrietta for groceries, but this time it was for barrels. I made 1 barrel of ketchup and a barrel of sauerkraut. But many things happened while we were living in the small lease, many hardships along with the pioneering. But we tried to overlook all, for everything was so different and new to us with heaps of existence. And besides, we were in God's country. Sowing wheat. We had picked cotton this fall, and October came and it was getting time for the wheat sowing. So we was wheat drill to buy, and that was $85 more than the cotton gin went gone. So that was that. It seemed like we never looked ahead until we had some of the implements to work with. Then it was another long trip to the railroad, but that was done with good grace. We were in God's country. But at last we had a drill to sow the wheat. Back in Missouri, we would sow by hand, and you would put a peck of wheat in the sack and swing it across your shoulder. Then you would take out a handful and sling it around. You could sow about 10 feet at once. You would have to walk around the field until you got it all done, then harrow the ground with cover the wheat. The harrow was made of tying some brush together with a chain, fastening a brush with a double tree. Then 2 single trees was fastened to a double tree, and the horses fastened to them. And that was the way it was done for a good many years. But in God's country, we had a drill to sow the wheat. The prairie fire. In 1892, the prairie grass was most as high as our covered wagon. One day, with some means, it got a fire started. We never knew how anyway it was existing. You could see the blaze leap. It looked like it was 50 feet in the air. We had burned a very small patch around our house, perhaps 1 acre. We had just built us a shed for the teams and chicken house for a cow hole. Our horses were tied up in the shed, and the fire was coming so fast that we could not tell whether we would have time to get them out or what to do. It looked like our horses and our milk cows and our family, too, would go up in flames. We did manage to get the teams and harness out of the shed and close the house, but the fire was getting very close. Just about half a mile away, our church, and we were so frightened. The little children crying and screaming at the horses snorting, and I was praying and working, too. We had a well that we had just dug in front of the house. We had to draw the water up by hand in a bucket, and was drawing water so that we might be able to save our house and children. The fire was getting pretty close, and we could see the jackrabbits, prairie dogs, prairie chickens, coyotes, and all kinds of birds and antelopes running in front of the fire. While we were watching the animals and the birds, I had every available thing of water that I had drawn from the well. We could hear the fire roaring and see the flames leaping. We were all covered with burning grass. We put the 6 little children in the house and fastened the door into one window. While we were standing in front of the hut watching the fire, I just happened to turn my head to get some bursts of grass out of my eyes, and I thought I could see the moving objects coming from the north. I wiped my eyes again and looked. Then I said to my husband, "Look, there's something coming from the north." He wiped his eyes and looked. It looked like a herd of stampeded cattle, and if it was that, we were goners, for they was coming towards us. We watched for a moment, and there was smoky and burned much grass flying in the air, for the fire was coming from the south and was blowing very hard, and we couldn't see. All that we could do was stand there and wait. There we were, we thought, between 2 fires. We could plainly see the fire coming from the southwest. My husband said if it was a stampede herd of cattle, that we were in for something. I might ask him why we hadn't better go into the house with the children, and then he said that it might not, that he would watch. But I never did go in. Just about the time I wiped my eyes again, I could see that it wasn't cattle. But we couldn't make out just what it was. It looked like men the best we could see through all that smoke. We just stood and looked, and I told my husband perhaps the Indians on the warpath. He said it might be, but he did not think so. But I do believe he thought it was Indians, for he turned white. So white that I could see he was scared. So was I. The fire coming one way and the Indians are stampeding cattle the other. We just stood there and most petrified for a few seconds, and then I could see that it was all men. But what kind of men? Cowboys or Indians? But all at once, men whooped ahead of the rest, and then I felt like it was the cowboys. And sure enough, he just come up charging in and felt some relief, but I was shaking so that I could hardly stand on my feet, and so I was my husband. The 6 little children in the house got over being scared and were just playing. When they opened the door, they looked so surprised to see so many cowboys. They never said a word, but just looked amazed. Cowboys saved the day. Then the boys in the roof Benton had sent them. You could see that the fire had thought he might be in danger, some of his cattle might be too. All the water I drawed out of the well was used for when the cowboys got there and got off their horses, dropped their bridle reins, and went up to the shed, and gathered up all the old feed sacks, and 2 of them picked up the water and walked to the edge of the high grass. Then all they did was wet the feed sacks and began to set the grass afire, but did not tell us what they were doing. We soon found out. They were backfiring. Backfiring works. They burned up all of the past the shed and then let it burn out quite a ways, but they would whip it out in the wet sacks. So when the fire got the burned grass, it would stop. They had a very hard time of it because the wind was so strong and they was burning against the wind. They worked almost all that night, and when they began, it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. About 6 o'clock, my husband said that we would give them something to eat. I tried to get them something nice to eat, but it's a hard job, for most everything we had in the house was black with burnt grass. But anyway, I made some biscuit and some coffee. They ate and drank coffee, but they told my husband that they wouldn't stay until I was out of danger. Later, we made some more coffee and some more biscuit. By that time, I'd gotten some of the burnt grass washed off of the thing so we could cook some food. When my husband took the food to them the second time, they told him that they would go told us to go to bed and rest, for we had gone through some experience. And they was right, too, for we had. I washed the little folks the best that I could and put them to bed. And of course, they thought it was funny to have the burnt black grass all over them, the rag dolls. Finally, we did try to sleep, and I did not sleep very much, and it was early next morning. I wanted to see how things looked. It all looked black. Cowboys were gone, and the fire was all out, but everything did look so queer. We looked around and fed little folks and went back to work on a clean house. Everything was so black we had to wash all our bedding and everything that we had, and wash the house outside and inside. We worked all day, and then the children's heads and my own head was to wash. It was a long time before I could get all the black off things. Was this God's country or not? Just a few days we noticed a buzzard sailing over where the fire had burned, so we hitched a team to the wagon and piled the children in and drove over the prairie. We were surprised to see some dead rabbits and snakes and all kinds of birds. When the wind blew from the south, we could smell something burn like bird hair. Well, it wasn't long until we came a big rain and helped to wash out black things, and pretty soon the grass came up so green and everything did look so beautiful. Before long, it covered the cattle. For several days of hard work, I got everyone cleaned up and the house cleaned too. While I was doing that, H.H. went to the railroad and bought some more fence posts and hired men back done with him. The hired men had gone to visit someone. He said that he was sorry that he had missed all the fun. I told him it wasn't much fun, but that he could have had fun setting the fence posts back where the fire had burned them. They went to work and it took several days. We finally got everything in shape again, but I never looked over the prairie the same way. I never looked over the prairie that way, but what I could imagine, I could see smoke. It took me a long time to get it. In fact, I never did, and it makes my flesh creep today when I think about how terrible fire and smoke. I said to myself, is this God's country or not? I didn't talk about it to my husband, so we just kept saying, go on, for everything will be okay. But sometimes I almost gave up. Then something kept saying, it must be God's country. Go on. Rock bottom. As time went on, everything went to rock bottom. Wheat, corn, cotton, hogs, cattle, and everything. One of the men that was in the drunken spree was wanting to go back to Texas. He had been raising quite a lot of corn and fed a bunch of hogs, and that was very nice. He could not sell them on the market, for there wasn't any market. So he came to our place and wanted us to buy them. We told him that we could not handle them either, for the weather was too warm to butcher. He just stayed and talked and cussed and country, and finally he said that he would buy them if he could have them for $1 a head. We didn't know what to do with them, so we finally said that we'd take them if he would bring them over. He said that he had his wagon in the shop and he was getting ready for leave the dang country. Well, I told him, this is God's country, but he said, it's a hell of a country. He was one of them good Methodists, but he did get drunk and got in jail. Foster was his name. Anyway, we felt sorry for him, so we told him that we would take the hogs and we would come that evening when it got cool to get them. We got a top on the wagon and went to get the hogs. They were nice young hogs and very fat. He put his dog in a pen to help us catch them. One of the hogs got too hot and keeled over, so H.H. just cut his throat. One of the hogs dead out of the whole batch wasn't so bad. We got the rest loaded and put the dead one on top of planks. That way we got to keep the hogs from jumping out. We gave Foster $8 and went home. We heated some water and cleaned the dead one and put the others in the pen. We worked most of the night before we got our work done. The next day I worked all day frying the meat down with big stone jars. It was lovely meat, too. The Texas man was ready to go back to Texas, and we never did see him again. But we hope he got his good back to good old Texas. Things just wasn't bedrock, but we stayed and fought it out and came out of the ride in the end. But it was a tough go. We raised 35 bales of cotton that year and sold 3 bales early and had the rest ginned and hauled home. We piled it in the yard until the next spring, and then we sold it for 3.5 cents a pound. It did not even pay for the picking. But you're in God's country, or so they said. The sandstorm. The very day that the school was out, we had the worst sandstorm. It came up about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It was so bad that we could not see 50 yards. We went in the house and closed all the doors and windows. But that did not make any difference. The house was just made of oxen, and the sand came through the cracks. Everything was covered. We had to sit and take it. We could not cook nor do anything but try to keep the children from choking to death. There was 2 hired men at the time, and my brother and 9 of our family, so there was, all sat in the sand pouring in. No super, no supper. We could not cook or even get milk out the cows. It lasted 18 hours. We just had to sit. Besides the sand blowing, it was an electric storm. Everything was so full of electricity that we could not touch anything. If you touched anything, the fire would make fly, and you struck like a match. The sun was shining, but the air was full of electricity. Abe Gunn, the hired man, came in from the field and threw his lines on the fence, and electricity flew down the fence. Children would get drinks of water so they could slide the tin cup over the stove and see the sparks fly. And the electricity killed streaks and wheat and oats. Some places in the fields for 50 feet looked like a fire had run out, and they was all dead. It never did grow anymore, and there were streaks over all over the whole country. We estimated that 1/5 of our crops was killed. We sure wondered if that was God's country. Well, the next morning, first thing was to dig out the sand from the house. We moved everything outside and swept it the best we could, and we tried to even cook some breakfast. Everything was so gritty we could hardly eat. Most of our groceries were ruined, so everyone else in the sandstorm all over the country where the land was plowed. The house was cleaned as best we could, and the cows milked and breakfast over. Everyone went to work. We was ever blue and homesick. But our cousin, Joe Parker, came up to cheer us up. He said it was one of the worst storms he'd ever saw. I laughed and said that I thought so, for it was God's country. He did not like it. He said that he was sorry for me and that I'd worked so hard and had been such a good sport about everything that he thought everything would be all right. Then in a few days we had a good rain. Things began to look pretty good. We felt better, but we did not have a very good crop. Wheat was short, corn not very good, cotton pretty fair. The price of cotton was down. It looked like we were going back to where we started from in '91. One thing, we had a big lease of 4 crops, so we tried to console ourselves and look forward to better times. Had God forsake us? It was July 1895, and I commenced to wonder if God had forsaken this country. Crops was bad, and almost all our money was gone, and all those teams to feed. Corn all burned, and 500 acres of wheat, and not one fine grain cut. It was all too short, just a very few oats. The cotton was about a foot high, and the jackrabbits cleaned it up. We had about 50 acres of cotton, but it did not last long when the jackrabbits stuck to it. And it looked like the grass was going to dry up too. No gardens, no feed for our hogs, no feed for our children. And our credit was not good, so we still got goods. Post office was still going. Not pay much, but we got canceled. That wasn't very much for everybody. It was too poor to buy stamps. Then we had a big rain that pepped things up. We'd make some hay and have some feed and grass and green up so our cows could give some milk. We plowed some ground and went to town and bought a bushel of black-eyed peas and planted them. We planted a new garden of most everything. Our neighbors laughed at us. But when fall came, they did not laugh. So did H. laugh when I told him that I was going to plant a garden. I said, "Why are we not even in God's country?" So he didn't say any more. He helped me plant the garden, and we had a nice garden with lots of black-eyed peas. I sold most of them. Everybody in the neighborhood that did not leave the country went to plow, turning under wheat land, and we did not make anything. A lot of people left. Some left in the night and took all their belongings, and some things that did not belong to them. They had their plows. They had bought plows and the implements, and my husband had gone to the notes, so that they left us to pay for their things, and nothing to pay with. We went to Brian and told the merchants what would happen, so they went, "Well, H, you go and put in your crop, and we will carry you over and let you have money to buy your seed." They bought a carload of every. They bought a carload of seed wheat and a carload of oats seed. The merchants let everybody have seed. but most of them had to give a mortgage on their teams and implements. They said that they would trust us. I felt like we were favored, and we was too. Perhaps the Cheyenne Arapahoes, Cod's country. We were still working on, but all the time wishing that we could really have a home. We were not afraid of work, but it seemed that just when you thought you had something, it would burn up and rain so much that everything would be ruined. The children were grown up, and we knew that they must get a home. So we went up to the town of Gary. We looked around and saw some nice places for sale. We made a claim. We made a deal for one claim, and that would be 160 acres. Another claim must be relinquished. The man relinquished, and H.H. filed for 80 acres. We paid the man $300 for his claim. I had the money in gold. We had sold part of our cattle for $20 a head, and when I made a little sack and fastened it under my skirt band. When I gave him the $300 in gold, the man's eyes got as big as a hen egg. He was so scared that he jumped on his horse and started for El Reno. We told him that it was 30 miles and the bank would be closed. But he said that if he couldn't get into the bank, he would hide until morning. If people knew that he had that much money, he would be robbed of their money. We put up the money for the other farm and the Bank of El Reno. We had to write to Washington and prove up on it, so it took quite a while. We got what was called a patent from the government. That 160 acres cost us about $700 and another 80 and 300. It was beautiful land in the valley of the south side of the North Canadian River. We had made up about our minds that the Chickasaw Nation wasn't God's country, but we had hopes of finding this new territory. So we started back home, or what we called home. It was our 7-year home and 5 of what we lived in. We thought we would stay one more year and sell our box houses. We kept building one most every year for the family group till we had 5 little box houses, the store and post office combined, and a little blacksmith shop and chicken houses. Those we would move if we wished to. All we had to leave was 4 wire fences. We had sold all our milk cows and got money for the 2 farms. I told my husband that something would have to be done. I couldn't go out and round up one like I did in the 90s. He laughed and said, "Wasn't them good old days?" I told him he might think so, but I didn't. Then he joked to me and said that I was a young rebel girl that debated the question that pursuit's better than possession. Yes, I told him that I still believe the pursuit is better, that I was still a pursuit of a home that we had talked about. That I did not believe that I could have fought the snakes, centipedes, coyotes, and all the rest of the varmints and lived like we did if I already had a home. And I was still thinking pursuit was better than possession. He laughed and said, "You are a queer woman, but one won't stay with." But anyway, we knew that we had something about some milk cows. Looking ahead. This new God's country was much further north than we would camp out while we were building. One thing was that we had a lumber yard in Gary, the place where we were going, and it wouldn't be so far to haul lumber. Our new place was just 4 miles from Gary. We had been going so much further than 4 miles, it would just be in that place. We sold our building to Charlie Willis, the man that had worked for us for 4 years. He bought all our improvements and was going to run the farm. When it came time for us to move, I felt like I wanted to stay, for we had lots of excitement and lots of fun, lots of hardships too, and lots of hard work. But it was all over now. We did like pioneering very much, for you get something out of it. We had not found God's country, but we were sure we would find it in our new home in Cheyenne country. So again, we were on our way. We were going to God's country. The wind and cluster. We were going to build a 2-story house, but everyone said that it was too high, so we built a 1.5. We wanted to plaster. No, as the people said, the wind will shatter the plaster off. So we just sealed the paper. But that was my mistake. The people did not know that they were talking about, for we built 2-story homes and plastered too. But later, I think it's not paid to take everyone's advice. Just do what you want to. But anyway, we built, and it was the show house of the whole country. You could see it for miles. At last, we're in God's country. We sell again. We stayed about 4 years, and then one day a man came to our place looking for a home. Ours being the best improved and best looking farm, he wanted to know what we would take for the place. Well, I said, I won't sell, for I'm tired of moving. Then H said that he would sell if he would get his price, and that was $6,500. The man said that he would take it if we would wait for part of the money. We said that we guessed we could, and we sold. Another house, another baby. Then it was looked about for some place to live. We had to give possession in May, so we moved to a small house again and looked for another place. On August 24th, 1901, we were still living in the little house, and we had another baby. We called her Daisy Lincoln. H was still looking for a better place to live. There was much talk in the cattle country coming in for settlement. That was a good place to settle if you had the right farms. Some places were bad, so H went to El Reno to register. When you registered, you would get the numbers in a sealed envelope. Then you would have to go locate the land. He registered, but he never drew a big place. We finally bought a lovely place just south of our old place. It was a new place and beautiful place, but again, it was too small, so we had to build a big kitchen 20 feet long and 18 feet wide, and a big back porch. It was a lovely place with all kinds of fruits and berries, apricots, all kinds of breadfruit, and all kinds of ornamented trees, so we could work very happily with such a lovely home. And we thought that for sure we would be there for life. We were sure that we had landed in God's country. For almost sure. Another baby. In 1904, there was another baby girl, Lily, on hand. This was our 12th child. She was born in November, so work was slacked up for some time. We buy some Texas land. We heard of good land that was selling around Vernon, Texas, so we decided that we would go to Texas and see. We thought that we were in God's country now and might take a chance on something. We went to Jerry and took on the train to Texas. Of course, we were met by a lot of real estate men. They drove us all over the country. But anyway, we bought 740 acres. We just paid $500 down. We paid $10 per acre. And that was quite a lot of money. We let a man have the place that's so weak, but we did not make much. So then did some Gary people laugh and say that we were crazy. We didn't say very much, for we began to think that maybe we had made a mistake. Payday came around and we had to pay $500 in the interest, so that was over $1,000 gone, and no crop. We didn't say much to our neighbors about it. Some of them felt sorry and some of them were tickled. It didn't worry me, for I knew that we had been in so many tight places before, and all we had to do was come right on the end, and I felt that we would this time. And we did. That fall, we got a telegram from the same man that we bought from him the place and get $15 per acre. So we talked it over and sent him a telegram saying $20 an acre and no less. The next day, here come a telegram saying sold. Deeds will follow. We was ever happy. But since then, the land was worth lots of money, so there was producing oil wells all over 700 acres. But you see that one never knows what to do. But we made good, for we cleared $4,000. We thought that was pretty good, and we bought another farm close to us, so we made. We thought that was the easiest money we had ever made, and only $1,000 invested for 8 months. Then we wondered if maybe Texas wasn't God's country. We sell again. It was not long until the man from Kentucky came to our place and wanted to know how much we wanted for our home place. I said that I had wanted to quit moving, but he kept hanging around, so H told him that he would take $10,000. He said sold. I had to have a big cry, for we had bought a lot of new furniture and we also had the other farm. But I didn't say anything. I wondered where we were going to this time. The next thing was to sell the other place just across the road. That did not take long. We just put up a sign for sale, and in a few days a man from Kansas came by looking for a farm. We sold our farm that week, and we had bought some money that we'd made from Texas. We paid $4,000, sold it for $4,500. Hunting again. So now we were all set for another search for God's country, another wild goose chase. This time it was Oregon. My father was there, and I had a sister there too, and they had been writing about what wonderful country it was. They wrote that Oregon is really God's country. We had been to search for God's country ever since we left Missouri, so we decided we would take another chance. We decided that it was on to Oregon. Trek across country. That was 1908, and there were 7 children, H and myself. 2 of the boys were in college, one was about 12, 3 little girls, and baby boy Harley. He was born in 1907. The money panic year near Oklahoma became a state. We was in a hustle around to get off this time, but we were going to the train and not in covered wagons. I thought it would be much better, and of course it was. We were only 5 days on the train, but believe me, it was some job even with all those little folks. It was a big trek across country, even though, for all, it was on midday train. We landed in Salem, Oregon about the middle of June, and it was so different, but it was lovely country. Somehow, I did not like it, but we thought we would try it. We had to have some place to live and could not find anything to rent that was fit to live in, so we began to look for something to buy. Another home. The real estate men hauled us all over the country in spring wagons, some with tops, some without, and the dust was about 3 inches deep on all the roads. But anyway, we did get to see lots of the country, and it was very beautiful with all the groves, tall fir trees, and Royal Lane cherries. Salem was noted for its cherries. We soon found a 2 big story house that belonged to a widow and 2 girls. They wanted to sell and buy a smaller house. We bought it, and it was more furniture to buy, and it took quite a lot of money. We looked back towards Oklahoma. It was getting fall now, and we began to think on going back to our old stomping ground. We did not like it, Oregon. It was a very good place, but it just wasn't what we thought it would be. I was getting discouraged hunting for God's country. I knew there must be such a place, but where? We decided that maybe Oklahoma wasn't so bad. Anyway, we decided to go back. We find God's country. We found just about every kind of person in every part of the country we lived. We worked, made friends, helped out where we could, and usually found that others were willing to help us when we had our troubles. We were commencing to wonder if there was a certain place that was God's country, or if God's country was everywhere, or if God wasn't the country, then what? H and I did a lot of thinking and little talking. We'd been living out on the farm in Woodward County for 3 years when H had stroke paralysis. We moved back to Enid so we could be near the good doctors. He lived for 2 years, then my beloved died. We had spent 48 years together hunting for God's country. Before he died, we learned something terribly important. We learned that God's country isn't in the country, it is in the mind. And we looked back and knew all the time when we was hunting for God's country, we had it. We worked hard, we was loyal, honest, and we was happy. For 48 years, we lived together in God's country. I'm gonna end it there because that was a lot of reading. And I know I'm gonna have a lot of it. So, excuse me. Let's see what's on that we can read. Let's see what Griffin's on. Black tab. Dragon, the Black Dragon Tavern is they're reading. Scarus is reading 100 Years of Solitude. You know what? I see someone on that is this really kind of come back to streaming. I'm gonna read him. I don't know. Anyone have any suggestions? It's Joey's doing part. Joe's doing art. Harp is reading. My computer keeps making it look like my stream froze. But there are these standard raid messages, because I can't come up with anything yet. I think we'll go ahead and read our Griffin. It's because it's fun to break the concentration. Nothing else. Yeah. Hopefully I will see everyone back tomorrow for some fairy tales. Still doing Hans Christian Andersen. And next week, provided things don't change, we'll be collabing with Matsu and reading some ghost stories. Which is good because I've got a few ghost story books I've picked up lately. I just have to see how personal stories are. Anyway, have some coffee. Hope everyone has a good night.